I'm just a hobbyist who likes to shoot his kids. Don't take that out of context and quote me on it because it sounds weird. What's up, everybody? BokehMarket.com here today to talk about the A7 III, but really we want to talk about some alternatives to the A7 III for those of you who can't quite stomach that $2,000 price point and don't want to get up in the price for all of that Sony glass that's great but really expensive. And what we do here, just to let you know, is try to empower you with options and alternatives from a price perspective that don't necessarily approach the bottom of the barrel. So when we talk about value, we're talking about best bang for your buck, and it's usually not the cheapest option, but it's an option that represents you saving money in the secondary and sometimes primary market by either bundling things together or just seeing where prices are trending, and that's where we're here to help you. So we're going to help you today on getting you the best alternatives for the A7 III. And what we want to do before that is remind you, if you like this video, give it a like. If you love this video, give it a love. If you hate the video, why don't you downvote us 2 times? And I want you to talk in the comments about what you think is the best budget hybrid camera. And it could be a Micro Four Thirds that we're not going to talk about today. It could be a Canon and Nikon, but you got to explain how you've got a hybrid camera shootout and you nominated a Nikon or a Canon. Okay, enough with all that. So let's get into this. What are our rules for best budget A7 III alternative? Well, it's got to be a good hybrid camera because the A7 III seems to be probably the best hybrid camera around, and for the money, it's really unbeatable in terms of the new price. Now, that's just for body, and we all know that lenses are really where your investment is, so that's why we want to explore some other alternatives where you can save a lot of money, maybe, on the body. We'll talk about that in a minute with the A7R II, and then save maybe a lot more in the glass. So we're going to go to BokehMarket.com in a little bit, and we're going to build some bundles, because you can do that there, where you can pick your body and then put with it all the lenses you think, and it'll give you what the used price value is for all that, as well as the new, because some people need new. They want warranties. They're working professionals. They don't want to deal with the question of whether or not the used gear is up to snuff. So that's an option for you as well. So what are our who are our 3 contenders? They're the Samsung NX1. I know it's a dead system, but I really don't care. It's a great system, and it's unfortunate that Samsung bailed on their customers and the market in general, but that camera and what they were doing with their S lenses represents a lot of innovation, and it's still relevant 4 years later, and we're going to talk about it. The Fuji X-T2 is another option that we want to look at because it's a great camera. It's a great all-arounder. It does wonderful video. It has some downsides in that department that we're going to discuss, but it's also got beautiful color science, great JPEGs clean off the camera that you don't have to do a lot of post-processing with. So that's definitely an option as well. And the third is an A7R II. And I know you're going to be like, wait, you just talked about Sony glass being expensive. But what I want to do is talk about why that's still a good hybrid camera, some advantages it has over the A7 III, and we're going to look at the pricing just to see if there's enough savings in the used market that maybe it can make up for some of the expensive glass. And we're going to build 2 types of bundles, kind of a entry level as a prosumer or professional, or maybe a high-end hobbyist where you would want to look in both a body and glass. And then we're going to do a serious bundle that can cost serious amounts of money to see where you can really save some money, or maybe not even make it worth it to forego the awesomeness that is the A7 III. So let's get into it. All right, first camera up in the Shootout is the Samsung NX1 Before I get into this camera, we're going to talk about a few points about this Shootout. First point about this Shootout, we're going to name a freaking winner. I hate watching Shootout videos, and I'm not just calling out photography YouTube channels. I'm also calling out anybody that reviews any products on YouTube. They always have these great comparison videos, great shootouts. They'll even name it in the title as a shootout, and then they'll say at the end of it, what do they say? You know what they say. Whatever's best for your needs. Screw that. We're going to name a winner. It is obviously whatever system you buy has to be best for your needs, but we also want to know who won. So hang around at the end of the video and you'll see who won. Secondly, anytime I'm talking about a camera, like I'm about to talk about the NX1, I'll be filming the video with that camera. But remember, I'm not a professional videographer. I'm not a professional photographer. I'm just a hobbyist who likes to shoot his kids. Don't take that out of context and quote me on it because it sounds weird. I like to take pictures of my kids and I like to shoot some video. I do some other stuff with video, so that's why I like hybrid cameras. Okay, so take everything you see with a grain of salt. I'm going to try to match them up as best as I can, but I want you to see the differences between them if there are any. But also, if there's not any differences, that should tell you that they're all pretty freaking good. That's a good segue into the NX1 because it's really freaking good as a video camera. The NX1 was released 4 years ago. It's still relevant today. All of the innovation that's come from all the manufacturers over the last few years, well, all the manufacturers besides Canon and Nikon. It's an inside joke with me, but not really inside anymore if you watched my last video. Canon and Nikon need to step it up. Anyway, Panasonic started with really pushing the boundaries on video, and the GH4 was the first one that got real consumer adoption for 4K, but the NX1 really beat it in every way for video. Every way. Autofocus, low light performance, sharper video, cleaner video, and then it trounced it with the 28 megapixel sensor for stills photography. And this, believe it or not, there's a few out there, including the next one we're going to talk about in the Fuji. There are a few crop sensor cameras out there that are perfectly suitable for professional use, and this is one of them. And yes, I know there's some professionals out there that use Macro Four Thirds. I know there's plenty of professionals out there that could do anything with anything. So, but I think a lot of people think you got to go full frame to get that professional look, and you know it can be done with any of them. But with this camera, you've got some really good professional quality glass, but you've also got some gaps in the lineup, and that's why this camera probably didn't take off like Samsung hoped it would, and then they bailed on everybody, abandoned the market, and now, yes, it's a dead system. So know that going in. I'm recommending a camera that is a dead system, but that should tell you how good it is. The fact that it's a dead system doesn't really scare me because these cameras aren't heavily used. I've bought a few of them over the last couple of years, and they've all been in great shape. All have low shutter counts. I think most of them are used for video, so they're sitting in a rig, sitting on a tripod somewhere, and then they get sold and don't have a lot of shutter clicks on them. So keep that in mind when you think about age of this system and worrying about whether or not it's going to hold up. It's been relevant for 4 years. It's going to be relevant for another 4 or 5 years. The only thing really keeping it from being still top of the heap, in my opinion, are those gaps in the glass and the fact that it doesn't have IBIS, which is so many manufacturers, even Fuji got on that train. So let's talk about it. Great video, 4K, super clean. There's a bitrate hack. You can get, I like the H.265 codec. So some people say it's a negative. I say it's positive. Great still shooter, some really good glass, excellent glass. 16 to 50 millimeter zoom is one of the best in that standard focal range. I think it's phenomenal. 50 to 150 millimeter S, and I'm talking about the 16 to 15 millimeter S, not the power zoom, which is kind of crappy. Both of the S lenses essentially are phenomenal, and in my opinion, which doesn't matter for much, top of its class. The 45 millimeter prime is a really good fast focusing portrait lens. The focal range isn't the best for everybody. You can go with the 85 millimeter, which is a little long, but it's the 1.4, which gets you that blurry background that everybody loves. The problem is the focusing is a dog. It's really slow. So all in all, really great camera, really good system with some gaps in the lenses. But I think you can get around that. For most people can get around that. Some working professionals cannot, and they won't consider this camera, and that's okay. For the rest of us, myself included, this is one that you should consider, especially given what we're about to see in terms of how much money you can save, not only over the Sony, but over all the other contenders. So let's talk about it. Okay, first things first, we want to go through and build a baseline bundle so you see what it's going to cost to get into this Sony A7 III system. One, because you have to buy new, and one, because there's expensive Sony glass, which is why we're trying to give you alternatives. So let's check out the A7 III. There's not going to be any used pricing for this particular camera. You'll see we just got the new pricing, and the only people under new are going to be Adorama and B&H. I think an Amazon listing will probably be coming soon. So we're going to add this to a bundle that we're going to build, and that's what these bundles are for. Is if you're considering buying used and someone's selling a camera and a bunch of lenses, this is an easy way to get a quick snapshot of what the value is for that. So for our basic bundle, we're going to add a portrait lens, and we're going to add a standard zoom lens. So for the portrait lens, let's go with the Sony Zeiss 55mm. All right, so we're going to add that, and you can see this does have a used and a new price in the market. We're going to go ahead and add a Sony 24-70 G Master, and you'll also see kind of where we're going. So for this basic bundle, we're looking at, so what you'll notice in this basic bundle is it's low because it's not including the $2,000 in the market price. So we're looking at $45.94 to get into this. So let's go one step further and add a couple of lenses. We're going to have a longer zoom, or we're going to have a longer zoom in addition to 24-70, so a 70-200, and we're also going to add an 85mm. So let's add that Sony 70-200mm, and we're gonna go for the f4 here, especially since we're comparing to crop sensor cameras that are gonna have the equivalent 2.8. So I don't think it's fair to compare a 70-200 2.8 to a APS-C sensor platform 70-200 2.8, because they're not the same. So I'm gonna give a little break here on the pricing for Sony in their favor, and let's go ahead and add that 85mm Sony, and I'm going to go to 1.8 just as an aside. I think a lot of people are going to think the baddest, or even the G Master 1.4, but this 1.8 is one of the best. So this 55 and the 85 are two of the best bang for your buck lenses out there on any platform. And I realize at $500 and $700, that's still pretty expensive for these lenses, but the quality of what you get is incredible for the money. Trust me on that. So if you add the original new price body, you're looking at over $6,000, which is a lot of money, but obviously there's a lot of great glass here, and that A7 III body in new, so it's going to come with a warranty and some of the upsides of not having to go with the used pricing. So there you go. So baseline around $6,000 with used lenses and the new body. So that's where we're starting out with Sony. All right, so now let's do the NX1 bundle, and what you'll notice is really the opposite of what we saw before, in that we have plenty of used market data, but what we lack is a new price because of what we talked about before. It's discontinued, but we're talking about used pricing here, so that's really what matters the most. All right, so we're going to add this to our bundle, and for this, there are equivalent lenses to kind of what we talked about with the Sony. So first off, we're going to add a 45mm 1.8 Samsung, and this would be that portrait lens that kind of compares to the 55mm Zeiss. Now, make no mistake, this isn't as good of a lens as that, but it is a very good lens for the money. Very, very good. Also, let's add that standard zoom. And you'll notice there's two 16 to 50 millimeters. Obviously, like I said before, we're not going to go with the power zoom. We're going to go with the S lens, which is fantastic. So if you'll notice, we were around $4,500 to get into this bundle with the new Sony and the two lenses in that sort of basic bundle range. Look where we are here, $1,880. You can even get cheaper than this if you buy this as a bundle. I've seen this NX1 with the grip, which you don't really need like you need it on the Fuji, because the performance is the same on the body with or without the grip. And this lens, I've seen this as low as like $1,300. And so we're really getting low. I think 1880 is a fair number that you can get all day, every day, but you could probably also get this, if you're patient, you could get this basic bundle for around $1,400-$1,500. Basically buying this and buying this, and then not necessarily getting the 45 with it, but getting it separately. I think you can get that. These go for $250 all day long, but really trend down in auctions around, and on the forums around $200, $220. All right, so let's build out the rest of this bundle. So there is a Samsung 50 to 150 millimeter lens that I absolutely love. It's a great all-around lens. It's a little bit on the heavy side, especially for crop sensor cameras, but it is phenomenal. And I think this pricing is pretty accurate. $1036. This is US dollars, by the way. The problem with these is they don't come up very often, so you might have to pay a little bit of a premium, but if you're patient, you can get in this for a little above $1,000 pretty consistently. And then let's add that Samsung 85 millimeter 1.4. This is the lens that I said has the focusing issues. It's a little slow to focus, but it is a wonderful lens. Is the issue with this, like the 150 to 150, is that it doesn't come up as often at this price. You can get one all day for $700, but that's not where the market is. You got to be patient. But look at the price we're landing on, $3,400 to get into what we had in the Sony at over $6,000. It's a huge savings, and really we're saving about $1,000 over the basic Sony bundles. So we've got a lot more, and this is all really good glass, but the problem with Samsung is we're sort of pushing the limits of what is available in really good glass for them. There are some, there's a 10 millimeter fisheye, I think, and a 16 millimeter that's decent, 30 millimeter is decent, but these represent really the good lenses. But again, look, $3,400 for what we're calling the badass bundle versus $4,500 for the Sony bundle that just included these first three pieces. So you can see where not only the cost savings is great, but this is also a very functional, very relevant platform if you went this route. Again, the warning: dead system, dead system, dead system. You've been warned. Next up is another camera like the NX1 that has a huge cult following. It's the Fuji X-T2. Now, Fuji kind of made this camera to fill a gap where there was really only the more expensive Sonys, and the NX1, it does both things really well in terms of video and stills photography. It's a better still shooter, in my opinion, than the Samsung, even though it has a lower megapixel sensor. I just think the way they process things, JPEG straight off the camera, colors, everything. Colors are better than Sony too, and that's where Sony really gets some dings, even though the newer cameras are a little better. Anyway, the thing that sucks about the Fuji is that it's tiny. You can't get a grip on it. Even if you have to buy the grip for video, you can't really get your hands around it. I have huge hands, and I find it uncomfortable to use. And sure, you can get the battery grip, which you need for more video anyway, which is another problem, but you still got this shallow thing that you can't really get a hold of. It's a minor quibble for a lot of people, but I don't love it. I also don't love that it doesn't have a touch screen, which is a problem with the other contender in this space, and that's the A7RII, in that when this camera was released, touch screens were pretty common, and they should have implemented it. It does, thankfully, though, have a joystick, which is great. But when you're holding the camera, hitting the shutter release and the joystick, it just doesn't really work. The menus are okay, not great. The dials, the manual control dials and the manual aperture on a lot of their lenses is something that really nobody else has, and they have made it so fun to use. So from that standpoint, I love Fuji for doing that, even though they took one of the dials off on the XH1. But so you have, on one hand, great usability with the dials and the fun factor, and then you have the fact that you have to deal with this tiny body and these average menus. So when you go to shoot video, you only get 10 minutes, and then if you want more, you have to slap on a $300 battery grip. And this is a place where, when we're going to talk about, when we build out this bundle, this is a place where I think you can find some value, because a lot of people are selling the XT2 to either get into the XH1 or get into the Sony system, and they're selling them with the battery grip. This is originally, I think, a $300 grip, and a lot of people are selling them with them at market price, which right now is around $1,100. So if you can get one of these for $1,100, $1,150 with the grip, you're actually saving a ton of money. Now, sure, that grip's worth a lot less now than when it first came out, and since we've seen price erosion since January, I want to say November 2017, December 2017 to now, this entire system's dropped significantly. So it represents a great value in the body. The problem is, and what we're gonna see, is the glass is still expensive. But first tip I can give you about Fuji, if you're buying an XT2 right now, try to find a bundle that has the grip. And usually when I say bundle, I'm talking about glass, but the grip is so essential for this camera, both from a handling standpoint and to get that 30-minute shooting, that you need to look for, if you're buying used, you need to look for it bundled at least with a grip, if not with some other lenses, and keep an eye on, if market price in March 2018 is around $1,100, keep an eye on that, because you can get one with the grip probably for about that price. So let's build a bundle and see where there are some advantages and some disadvantages. All right, next up, Fuji X-T2. This is going to be the first one you notice that's going to have both used and new pricing. Let's talk about this for just a minute. $1,164. If you're paying that for a used X-T2, I'd like to see that with the battery grip. Right now, with the XH1 and the A7III forcing this price downward, for the first time really we've seen significant price erosion for this camera since its inception. Its prices have held up really well. But right now, end of March 2018, I want to see you get that with a grip. If it's really well used, no grip, you need to be looking around $1,025. And by the end of the summer, I think you'll be able to grab this camera without grip for right around $900, $925. Let's add this to the bundle. And then when we go into this bundle, let's go ahead and add this standard zoom, the 1655. I like this lens. One thing I don't love about it is it needs OIS, especially since there's no IBIS in the Fuji body. This X-T2, it does have an XH1. Because this is a great video lens otherwise, without OIS, it makes it not quite as good. And it's a couple $100 more, about $250 more than you can get the equivalent Samsung 16 to 50 S lens. Let's add the 50mm f2 Fuji. This is a great lens. It doesn't have the same, it has a lot faster autofocus than the 56mm 1.2 that has better, bokeh opportunities, but this lens is wonderful, great all-around lens, especially for the money. Again, we're trending about $120 more than we were on the Samsung, but that's what you're going to pay for a non-dead system, and obviously things are worth what people are willing to pay. But right now, with this basic bundle, we're about $500 or $600 more than the Samsung, which is not terrible. You can do a lot with $500 or $600 used, so keep that in mind. That's not terrible, and it still represents a pretty significant savings over the Sony basic bundle, which was over, I think, $4,500. So let's go ahead and build out the rest of this bundle. So the 50 to 140 millimeter, that's going to be right at $1,200, and I think that's a pretty accurate price for what this is going for, and it's got the OIS, which we wanted in the other lens. Let's also add the 90mm the 90mm f2, which I absolutely love. This is one of my favorite lenses, the Fuji 90mm f2. If I had my way, I was building out this kit just for me, I'd have the body and these last two lenses, and probably be able to do everything I need with both of those. So here we are, $42.82. So we're still less than the original Sony basic bundle, and we're a couple of $1,000s less than the Sony badass bundle. So still significant savings. We are trending up in our pricing, but still enough savings to have this represent a lot of bang for your buck. Really good value when compared to the Sony A7 III in terms of performance and price. I really like this one. Last up in this shootout is the A7R II. Lots to love here, some things not to love. Not to love's first: no touchscreen, tiny body, tiny battery, crappy Sony menus, and the 4K video isn't that great when compared to its competition. Right now I'm shooting in full frame mode. Super 35 mode gets you a little bit better, cleaner picture, but then you've got other considerations with glass and distance from subject and all of that. So we're going to shoot in full frame regular mode. You'll see what you see. And a couple of positives about this: this is obviously a great stills photography camera, 42 megapixels, and kicking it out of the gate with 4K as well. And this is at a time where other stills cameras like the D850 in the high megapixel range didn't exist that had 4K video. So that's a great offering in the A7R II, which makes it a good hybrid camera, especially if you're stills heavy but you want to shoot a little video. Then you'd opt for the A7R II, and then you'd go and shoot some video. Had to make sure I was still recording. The problem with the A7R II right now is that it's still expensive. It's trending around, it's certainly trending down since the A7R III announcement, and then a 1-2 punch with the A7 III has put some downward pressure on this camera. Early in the year we were tracking around $1,900. They announced A7R III. It rode down to around $1,750, and we're still showing around $1,700. But if you look at the most recent data that we're getting in the market, I've browsed the forums and seen really clean bodies in the $1,500 range. So even in our bundles that we price out, it's going to show $1,700. You can find them from around $1,500. Don't pay $1,700 unless it's super clean, like very low shutter count, super clean camera, ready to go, hopefully purchased in the last year. Part of that is because Sony hasn't lowered the new price yet. It's still $23.98 new, which it's been for, I don't know, a year. And part of it is it's just that good of a camera. The issue is, remember what we discussed at the beginning of the video, was maybe that the used price is so good that it will make up for some of the glass. So if it's let's say it was a $1,000 camera, well then you can buy almost a decent zoom, maybe the upcoming Tamron, what is it, 25 to 78, 28 to 75 or whatever, in the $1,100 range, or a good prime or two. But with it being at that $1,700, even $1,500 price point, it's not quite cheap enough to really pull people away from the Sony A7 III. I will say, if you are stills heavy and you just need a little bit of video, it's a good option to consider, but I would not buy it right now. I think long term the A7R III is going to be a better value if you were buying right now, but I think there's going to be enough price erosion in this camera that by the end of the summer it's going to be around that $1,300 price point everywhere, meaning you can probably find it for around $1,200 if you're patient. And at that price, I think now you've got a contender, because if you pair a $1,200 A7R II with another $1,000, you've got probably a standard zoom for what you would, and the body for what you would pay for just the body in the A7 III. So then we're talking pretty good value. So let's see what the bundle says, and I think you'll notice pretty quickly that it's probably not a great value at this point. but we'll also, like I said, discuss some of the ways that it can be. So let's check it out. All right, so last one up is going to be the Sony A7RII. And this one also will have used in new pricing, and this one we have a whole lot of data on. When we've seen downward pricing trends since the A7R III was announced, and even more since the A7III was announced. Going to show 1,700, like I told you before. I've seen them at 1,500. I think by the end of the summer, that $1,500 price point is going to be pretty standard for a clean body. Right now, for a really super clean body, $1,700 is about the going price. Maybe in the $1,650 kind of range, but you're not going to really overpay right now at $1,700. I think pretty soon though, you will be if you're paying that price. So let's go ahead and add that 24 to 70 millimeter Sony G Master that we had before, and we're going to add the same Zeiss Sony 55 millimeter, and there you go, we're at 4301. If you remember, the new body with these two lenses for the A7 III was around $4,500, so already you see that it's not a great deal. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and add that 85 millimeter 1.8 Sony, and you see we're inching up, same lens before. We're going to add the 70 to 200 millimeter Sony f4, and here we are, $57.98, so only still a few $100 cheaper than the other Sony A7 III. Not entirely competitive as we discussed, but there are some benefits here. Namely, if you're a still shooter, that 42 megapixel sensor, you still got 4K without going way up into the A7R III price. So if you can deal with a little bit slower autofocus, and you can deal with not quite the same in terms of video, you might be at an advantage with the A7R II, even buying used. There is a pretty considerable price difference in used versus new, so that's worth considering as well. But right now, if I were you and I was looking at a high megapixel 4K shooter and I needed manual or autofocus, I wouldn't look at the D850. I would look at either the A7R III, which I think is long-term going to be a better value, or this A7R II in a few months when it takes the full hit of the price erosion from the newly announced bodies in this space. So that's the A7R II. Not the greatest value right now when compared to the A7 III, but still a fantastic all-around camera and worth your consideration for sure. So that's going to do it for this shootout. We ran a little long on this one, but it's an important market segment that I wanted to discuss because this is not only where you're going to have the biggest cross-section of people at this price point, and the fact that it's a hybrid camera and the fact that it's good enough for the professional market, it's also representative of an area where Canon and Nikon need to be pushed the most, both in terms of price and performance, and I think we're going to see that. So for that, I'm thankful for the A7 III. I don't own a Sony camera, so before y'all get at me in the comments, I don't own a Sony camera. I'm not a Sony fanboy. I am a fan of what they're doing to push the market forward, and I think we're seeing that every day. So again, if you like it, give us a like. If you love it, we'd love a subscribe. Thanks so much, y'all. Get at me in the comments. Have a great day.